here we are with another Chess.com podcast. Now this is a white to move and mate in 2 puzzle, but I've brought this up for a very specific reason. I'd like to quickly talk about restricting the king's movement and keeping him his options trapped in and restricted. Now it's very easy to see how white could just forcefully win this endgame. You know, queen to b8 check, king to c6, c8 queening with check, knight takes c8, d takes c8 queening, checkmate. But what this does, it really just kind of invalidates the understanding of the situation. It's just chucking our forces at the king until eventually he succumbs to a checkmate. What we want to do is to understand the king's predicament. And if we just look at the position, we can see that the queen protects the knight and the knight protects the c7 pawn. So our pieces are protected, but what purpose do they serve around the king? Well, they take squares away from the king. These 2 pawns here on c7 and d7, not only does the c7 pawn take away that square for the king, but the c8 and b8 squares are taken. The knight on a8 has his square taken, and also protects the b6 square, whereas the black king just has this one piece smothering him on a7, meaning that the black king can only come to a6 and c6. So now we're starting to understand the situation. The black king's only got a couple of escape routes here, and if we can cut them off, we'll be able to win this endgame very simply. And also we should notice that the queen's serving no purpose around the king at the moment, so it should become quite apparent to us that this is a queen to move kind of puzzle. So the first thing I looked at was to try and take both these squares, the a6 and c6, away from black in one swoop with the move queen to e6. But this move, not only does it leave the knight on a8 en prise, but it allows the knight from a7 to come to c6, giving the king more options. Now he can, not only can he take on a8, where he's got the a7 and c6 squares available to him. So moving our queen to e6 is actually giving the king more options, and there's no mate in one here. So how about moving the queen, instead of to e6, to d5 with check? Now it will protect this knight on a8. Well, again, we can see the knight c6 straight away, freeing up 2 squares, the a6 and a7 squares for the black king, and again there's no mate in one. So I've tried taking away the a6 and c6 squares in one go. I then tried taking away just the c6 square. Then I tried taking away just the a6 square, and that's where I found the solution. No matter what black does here, he loses in one move. Now the black king has got his 2 options. He can again take this knight on a8, but we see as soon as he takes on a8, simply the move c8 queening is checkmate, because the black knight is pinned. This is because, you know, the black king, when it goes into the corner, with one square being pinned, it has 2 escape squares. So if we can put a forceful piece onto c8, we'll get our checkmate, and that's what we did with c8 queen. So what other options does the black king have here? Well, he could come to c6, so king to c6. But now let's look at the squares around him. He can take the pawn on d7. He can go back from whence he came on b7, but what we can see through this very simple pattern is if we can get our queen to d5, we will take away all of the flight squares for the king. So the queen comes to d5 and it's checkmate. So the king can't move in this after queen comes to a2. So it's a knight move. Now, if the knight came to c6, a move we've seen twice before, trying to free up space, it does nothing. In fact, it takes away one of the flight squares, and we can now see that the black king has got no squares available to him. So all we need to do is place a piece next to him which can attack him. So we do c8 queen and it's checkmate. So instead of sending the knight to c6, we could send the knight to c8. This still leaves open the option that the black king can come to c6. All the other squares around him are protected or occupied. But we have this one pawn here on d7, and if we push this pawn forward and can take away the c6 square, and we do that by promoting to a knight, we get an excellent checkmate. So I hope that's been instructional in showing you how to try and work through these puzzles, these mates in two. Don't just look at forceful check moves, and if you know like here, like in the original kind of movement I did, queen to d5 check, yes, that should be your first kind of line of inquiry, but after that just look at the squares available to the black king and how we can take those squares away and control the squares around him, and usually you'll be able to solve these puzzles very quickly. I hope you've enjoyed this Chess.com podcast. I'll be producing another one next week.